after your busy week, after your busy holiday week, to join here today to this workshop. I mean, it's my first identity architecture workshop, technically the second, but it's the rounds. I mean, the question itself already comes up. The title of the workshop is Why the Same Patterns Keep Repeating, right? An identity architecture workshop. Understanding what identity architecture is the main goal of today's session. On one hand side, you will understand what the underlying patterns are and how they're actually constructed, how identity is something very structural and systematical, and we learn to create a certain distance between ourself and the problems that we perceive, because a lot of times problems and identity is something that we intertwine, that I am the way that I am because of this, or I am just not good enough, I am just not worthy of love, like all of these things that we attach, the sentences, the belief systems, we believe that is a natural law, that is who we are, and that is something that we just can't change, right? And the idea behind is that identity is actually something very structural and systematical that you will understand throughout this entire presentation that I've prepared for you, where it is all about understanding the deeper layers of what makes you really you. So that is the point for tonight, right? Understanding where those beliefs are coming from, why they are so important in your life, and how you can actually start changing them in real time. So it's an interactive workshop. Feel free, if you're in bed, if you have a piece of paper or just something to take down, to take notes, or maybe take screenshots as the presentation is unfolding. Feel free to do so, because there will be quite some information that will be shared here. Okay, so on one
Okay.
hand side, I will go ahead and there we go. I'm going to be sharing my screen. Oh, or not. Do you see my screen?
Yes,
Do you see the
I do.
presentation?
I see on gray background. Yes. Why you keep repeating? Yeah.
Ah, perfect. So that's what I wanted to see. Perfect. So, again, a live workshop on the deeper identity patterns shaping your habits, relationships, self worth, and self trust. So, the idea here is to basically bring awareness towards those different layers, right? Tonight is for the people who have already done a lot of reflection, right? You've read the books, you may be interested into that field, you're into personal development, you've had some talks with people already about it, you've driven deeper into that field, but you still find yourself in versions of the same old loops. So my goal here is not to overwhelm you with theory, right? Because there is theory and there is practice. And the real transformation is actually applying the theory that you've learned for yourself. And then later on, either through being guided or through guiding yourself, implementing those strategies into your life to really see evidence of that new version, that new identity that you want to create. So it's to help you to understand those patterns more clearly, more honestly, and in a way that actually lands. So that gap between insight and real change is exactly what we're looking at tonight. So this is where it really gets into the depth. So why listen to me? I mean, we've had the pleasure of talking already, but this is the work that I'm in for the past 10 plus years. I work with people who are self aware, but feel trapped in repeating emotional, relational, and identity based patterns. This is my work in identity work and personal development world, work in the business world. I've transitioned through many different phases over the past 10 years and coached, worked, mentored, had real in-depth coaching conversations with people in person and online with, I would say, between 1,000 and 2,000 people overall. So this is not something new to me. This is something that I've been really just working on in the past 10 years. And I see a lot that this work, or this specific work of identity architecture, is not something that is basically limited to your intelligence, right? We believe that these things can only happen to people who are not self-aware and who don't do personal development. I've worked literally with entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, PhD graduates, spiritual leaders, so from people from all kinds of fields. The problem is not off like most often not a lack of intelligence. It's something that goes beyond the intellect, that goes beyond, the kind of like facet that you hold, or the knowledge that you hold in a specific field, because we are just all human, right? We're all just spiritual beings, you living a human existence, and what keeps repeating is often not random behavior, but an internal human default system that still runs on old patterns. This is why you can see successful entrepreneurs who are so super famous in their one specific field. But if you, I've had a great example where, I don't know, in the business world, people know Alex Hormozy. He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs and one of the smartest business people out there. And he had around 2 months ago an interview with Tony Robbins, one of the greatest mentors and coaches of all time. And they sat together, and people until that point have been kind of like putting Alex on a pedestal, on that kind of god-like entrepreneur type of persona. And through that 1.5 hour coaching session, or basically interview, it was supposed to be an interview, but it turned out into a coaching session. Tony got into the real nitty itty gritties. He kind of uncovered the inner system that this person that is so successful from the outside and that has it all, that has millions and millions of euros in his bank account, that flies private jet, that just lives this so perfect life, at the core has a core wound where we uncovered that he has a core wound that is basically him needing to perform and never being satisfied with an outcome until he reaches a certain pedestal that is basically impossible for him to reach, right? So we're all living a human existence, and what keeps repeating is often not random behavior, but an internal human default system that still runs on older patterns. So the idea here is then that's what my work focuses. I believe in working from the heart and combining intuition with a really strong rational thinking process. I focus on identity architecture, inner system coaching, self concept, parts work, NLP work, because this is where I have my certifications in, and the deeper structures underneath behavior to create awareness. From that awareness, create acceptance, acknowledgement, and then a specific process tailored on the specific person that I'm working with to kind of lead them over into their own transformative journey. And everything you learn tonight comes from over 10,000 plus hours of coaching, observation, and everything I'm sharing tonight is basically what I saw and what I see in real people and not just in theory and in books. So a little bit more about me. If you don't know, I'm someone who has been working and struggling with his own identity patterns that have been cycling for the past 20 plus years. And I'm someone who has been lacking a lot of self-worth, self-confidence, and had a very, weak and low self-image until this moment in his life. And throughout personal development, meeting people who have opened my eyes to a different field, a different layer, I've kind of understood that going deep, or the process of going through pain and uncovering what is hidden underneath, like that, always trying to smile in public, always trying to be happy and this good person. What is actually lying underneath there is what the real answer is towards the question that I was looking for, the patterns and what they are all about. And exactly this. Throughout the past 6 years, I've been on this journey, spiritual journey, personal development journey, worked with many different coaches as well, because even coaches need coaches. That's just how the world works. Everybody needs somehow guidance because we think we are alone in this life, but this is not actually what it's supposed to be, right? Everybody needs somehow a guide that can put a mirror in front of his face to kind of like showcase what this life is all about, right? So I'm a family person. I'm a person very much involved into business. I'm a goofball from time to time. Like a lot of times I don't take life too serious, and I don't look at life through such a strong and serious lens. If you know me, if you get to know me closely, I'm really someone that can joke a lot, that can make a lot of fun of life, and really tries to see life as one big experience, one big game, instead of this really, clustered in. We got to work, we got to wake up, we got to, somehow make expectations or pay the dues of the expectations that other people or society sets to us, right? And around a year ago, I set myself out publicly in the space of identity coaching. So since then, I've kind of like become semi semi famous on Instagram through like just pointing up fingers, right? But I'm just at the end of the day, I'm just a normal guy that at the core is interested in human connection, personal development, asking himself a lot of spiritual questions about what the existence of our soul and of life is really supposed to be, and just, living towards my purpose, my big mission to help influence, change, transform as many lives as I possibly can while I'm enjoying my own process and my own transformation here in this world, right? What you can expect from tonight, you get in the next 60 minutes clarity. So you understand why certain patterns keep repeating, even when you already see them clearly, right? A deeper lens will look beneath the visible behavior and into the protective logic, which is quite important, and identity structures that are underneath the patterns that you hold. You'll get relief, so you see why this is usually not a lack of intelligence, discipline, effort, bad luck, or just the cards that you were dealt, but rather something deeper in your own system. Real life relevance. So we'll connect this work to your relationship, to what is really happening in your life, to your self trust, self worth, habits, boundaries, and the way you move through life. So you get really a realistic understanding of what is happening. And you leave with next steps. So you leave with a clear sense of what real change actually requires and where this work begins. Why this workshop matters, before we get into it properly, you are aware of your patterns, right? You can probably pinpoint them, recognize your patterns. You've talked to therapists, coaches, friends, mentors, gurus about them. You can recognize them and even name the triggers activating them. You are aware, right? That's the underlying foundation. But the loops still repeat. The same shutdown, people pleasing, over controlling, overthinking attitude, self abandonment still return and takes control. So this creates inattention, a feeling of dissatisfaction because you know what is happening on the surface, but don't, somehow, even though you're so aware of it and you're so smart and you're doing all the right things, those unconscious patterns keep popping up again, and this creates frustration and tension. So what once felt like growth, like I'm actually doing this, I'm actually able to, somehow figure out life, starts becoming frustration, judgment, or, a feeling of low self-worth. Something must be wrong with you, right? Like, why can't I get this going? So the core question then becomes, my apologies, the core question then becomes, if I already understand all of this, why am I still doing it? Now comes the real juicy part, okay? The information that a lot of people are not aware of, but if you start understanding them, you already get a lot of aha moments about who you are and why your brain, your nervous system, and your identity, your awareness, your conscious awareness is behaving the way that it is behaving. So your brain is not just recording reality. So prediction comes first. Your brain, and that is a fact. Research from neuroscience, neurobiology, and just brain chemistry have brought out studies over the past 10 to 15 years that your brain takes in far more information than you can consciously process. So it constantly fills in reality through the expectations and prior experience. This number will shock now a little bit because you receive roughly 11 million bits of information through your sensory inputs every single second. Your conscious awareness, your conscious processing apparatus can only handle and process, so what you see, hear, taste, feel, smell, and touch, can only handle around 50 bits of information per second. So, what you perceive as reality is not reality. It is a fractal of reality. And hence, because that gap is so huge, we're talking 11 million bits to 50 bits, that is huge. All of that other rest is happening subconsciously. Because your brain cannot process that many informations, it needs to rely on a process called predictive processing. So your brain basically picks what it already knows. It filters reality literally through a filter, a lens that it puts in front of your eyes, in front of your senses. It filters reality based on your prior experiences, prior expectations, and prior beliefs. So basically, it predicts the future based upon its past. Because in the moment, it can't 100% comprehend what is happening, so it needs something to rely upon. And this process called predictive processing is doing exactly that, taking what it already knows. So the way you looked at yourself in the past, the way your parents maybe behaved towards you, the self-worth that you kind of like build up on throughout your childhood, the belief systems that you held in your past throughout your childhood. All of these things is what your brain knows best because it has already through lived it. And I talk about this a lot in my podcasts, on my YouTube videos, that your brain doesn't care what is good for you. Your brain only cares about the survival of the system because our core primal needs is basically survival, security, love, and connection. If those basic desires are not met, then your brain kind of fires because potentially this would mean in the past threat, danger, death. So your brain's main algorithm focuses on what it can predict and what it can repeat. So this process of predictive processing takes everything that it knows already about you, how you behaved and how you survived in the past, and uses that to predict your future. So here then identity becomes a super powerful filter. Because the way you see yourself starts shaping the way you see your options, your failures, and other people around you. And this is the real leverage point. Because if the filter through which you perceive life stays the same, AKA, if you keep living your present life, going into the future, wanting a better life, wanting better relationships, wanting more, I don't know, connection, love, abundance, success, monetary or otherwise, but your life still looks through the lens of your old limiting beliefs. I am not good enough. I am not worthy of love. I need to work really, really hard to receive love and affection. Or I need to control the situation because if I don't, then I'll lose control. And this means, I don't know, hurt, failure, dissatisfaction. If you live your presence with your old limiting beliefs from your past, the pattern usually stays alive too because it wants to repeat. Everything in your nervous system screams for do what we already know. Don't try out something new because new potentially means danger and death. Reflection exercise number one. So here, you can either write that down, you can either just take a screenshot and do it later for yourself. You know, it's a little reflection exercise to kind of dissect a little bit your brain and your limiting beliefs. Here, a deeper question to sit with. Where in your life do you keep seeing repeating patterns, despite knowing exactly what to do? Ask yourself that question. Write it down. Where in your life do you keep seeing repeating patterns despite knowing exactly what to do? What do you start telling yourself about who you are when it happens again? So, except, for example, I'm just not consistent. I'm bad at relationships. I always sabotage myself. Um, I will lose this person anyways. Money is not in my favor. I'm not lucky. What are you telling yourself in that moment about yourself? So, in that moment, what identity does your mind default to? Start becoming aware of it. Take a moment, really write those questions down and ask yourself in your brain. Maybe you have already some ideas. Write them down. Write them down and have them visible for you. Because that identity or that belief pattern of I'm not good enough, I don't deserve love. This is the underlying pattern underneath I am bad at relationships. I'm bad at relationships is just a surface pattern. But the real core identity or belief pattern is I'm not good enough. I don't feel myself good enough. I don't deserve love. Because there is power in words, right? Every word that you use has a certain frequency. And if you look at everything that you say and use after the words or after the letters I and am, so I am, is directly correlated with how you see yourself and how you want your entire reality to perceive you. So this is why it's really important to understand that, because everything that you use after the words I and am is a direct cut through the onion to your center core of how your self-concept, how you believe you think you are, who you are, and how you think people look at you actually is. So once you
But
step into that,
can I tell something?
of course,
For me, it's not actually that simple. Never have thoughts like I am not good enough, but probably that's the pattern. But I never have a thought I am not good enough, or I have to dig much deeper to understand that that is the pattern.
because
So
a
it's
lot
not
of
that obvious.
100%. Because a lot of times that pattern itself or that thought usually comes layers deeper because those belief systems and those core wounds that we went through or in our childhood through our upbringing, we know what can already or shifts us. We are aware of what's happening. Those certain patterns are attached to certain emotions, right? And the emotions is what we don't want to feel. In a logic sense, we can name what is happening. We can say, yeah, this happened, that happened. I'm not feeling good enough. I feel like I don't deserve love, right? But what it really means, the layer underneath, because after logic always comes emotion, and emotion is what we're scared of. Emotions is usually what we are running away from because logically we can name all of the answers to a certain problem, but we never want to really resolve because that would mean bringing up old emotions, bringing up old, really the core of that specific belief. That is where a lot of people stop. Because if I just peel off the onion, the surface, right? I'm just taking the logic out of it. Logic itself doesn't hurt. It doesn't have any emotions. It's easy. It's rationalizable. It's rationalizable. But the emotion itself is what we're scared of. So a lot of times, the deeper we dig, and the more we uncover, and this takes time, the more the emotion starts coming up through different layers that are maybe underneath it, right? So that is the core behind. It's not rational that A plus B is C, but rather, okay, what makes you think why is A so important? What makes you think why B is so important? Okay, let's dissect that. Let's take that deeper. So this is why an identity process is usually a process that takes quite a little bit of time. What I would like you to do, what we can do, because as the call is recorded, write down those questions. If you have them, just note them somewhere, note them on your phone, and let's have a Q&A session at the end, right? Everything that you've witnessing so far, because we are getting into the deeper layers of what is happening afterwards, write them down so at the end we can have a discussion about it, okay?
Okay.
Is that cool for you?
Yes, sure.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, so once you step into that identity, what does it make you think, feel, and do next? Name all of the thoughts, sensations, and feelings that come up. Here, then, a question to ponder upon. What if that belief isn't actually who you are, but just a pattern your system repeated long enough until it actually felt true? That is a deeper moment to reflect upon. The false assumptions that we have here. Most people assume this: once I understand the pattern, change should follow naturally. Insight should be enough to solve the problem. But that's not usually true, right? Because awareness is valuable, but awareness and transformation are not the same thing. So creating awareness towards a problem, being able to say, all right, I don't have a deeper thought. Okay, so everything is okay, but actually taking that, dissecting that, and going deeper, which is a longer process, which is an annoying process, because who wants to kind of like go through negative feelings, emotions, and patterns that come up? Maybe consciously we're not aware of certain things happening, but maybe it was something that we kind of pushed away consciously. Maybe if we can become aware of what that is, then something inside of you, because if you feel like you have those patterns, something inside of you keeps pushing you into a certain direction. So there is a certain demand for resolving it. Otherwise, that demand wouldn't be there. Otherwise, the question wouldn't come up, right? Or if the influence of other people around you, of your environment, was so strong that it made you believe a certain way, maybe there doesn't have to be like a traumatic experience, right? Maybe it's just the sometimes the presence of something bad can trigger something even worse, and maybe the absence of a presence can trigger something really bad as well. So it's maybe not what we experience, but maybe what we didn't experience either. So these are two questions again to ponder upon. But usually that's not true, right? Awareness is valuable again, but awareness and transformation are not the same thing. And this is important because you can know and still repeat. Because understanding a pattern does not automatically reorganize the deeper system underneath it. Your pattern is actually tied to something deeper. And it is often tied to a core human desire that was neglected, that was absent, and that was not given in that specific moment, and that specific experience that you had in the past. Those human desires are safety, protection, or security, protection, familiarity, love, and connection. So, or other older ways your system learned to stay stable. So the real shift then starts here. The moment you stop assuming insight should be enough, you can begin looking at what is actually holding the pattern in place. And beliefs are not harmless sentences either, because your beliefs shape your perception. A belief is not just a sentence in your head, it becomes part of the filter through which you interpret events, people, and yourself. Beliefs influence emotion. So, what you expect to be true changes how situations feel before you even consciously analyze them. Beliefs as well influence your actions. So, the way you interpret reality affects what you do next, what you avoid, and what you believe is available to you. So, beliefs as well quietly create identity. Repeated beliefs for long enough become repeated perceptions. And repeated perceptions begin shaping the concept of yourself, how you see yourself, and how you believe that other people see you. So, this is why this matters. Limiting beliefs are not just negative thoughts, right? They are part of the mechanism by which a person keeps recreating the same lived reality. Identity is a stronger filter than most people realize because identity sounds like a description, right? This is what we believe. We think that identity is like, well, I'm that kind of person who, or that's just how I am, or this is just who I've always been. But identity works like direct instructions. Those statements of I'm the kind of person, that's just how or who I am. I've always been this way. Those should really trigger a red flag within you because we are turning a pattern into a law of nature. So, when it comes to relationships, if relationships somehow not work out or they're not serious or they're very surface pattern, then a question to ponder up on: what do you keep telling yourself about those relationships? I always think that other men are, or maybe I'm just not the right fit for a serious relationship. Or when it comes to your self worth, right? Whenever something good happens, you don't recognize it. But whenever something bad happens, you're like, well, obviously this was supposed to happen. Of course, luck is not on my side. Everyone has its own game and everyone has its own language to use. So, what that means for you should be defined through your lens and your reality. What I've been hearing from hundreds and even thousands of people are the main core problems that people have is we believe that we have a sense of low self-worth. We feel like we're not good enough. We have to earn our space in this or our place in this world. This can have many reasons, many factors why that is happening. You know, it can be your upbringing. Maybe your parents weren't giving you enough love and affection, were not fulfilling your human desires. Maybe it was bullies or, hurt people, right? Maybe it was people in school. Maybe it was your first relationship. Something inside of your life that happened. Some kind of environment, consistency, some kind of human need or desire that has not been met, which is common for everyone because it can happen very easy and very simple. that has created a certain belief about who you think you are, right? Because a pattern from the past, I've often struggled to stay consistent with a relationship or with the gym or with my business or at work. All of a sudden, if repeated long enough, if repeated on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, can all of a sudden turn into I'm not a consistent person. And the first one was descriptive. The second one is actually self programming. Because, again, as I've explained to in the beginning, reality as it is individual and it's perceptual. So, my reality and your reality are completely different because we're looking through different lenses and different filters. Your lens and your filter is being made up by your past experiences, your past beliefs, and whatever you experienced in the past. So, how you see the world is exactly through that filter. How I see the world is exactly through my filter. So, we can look at the same glass, and for you, it might be half full. For me, it might be half empty. Who is right? Who is wrong? Right? And that's the beauty of life that we can't just say there are certain things that are facts, and then there are beliefs, right? Facts are just human laws. If you stand at a cliff, the next, the law of what is it called? Gravity is destined to pull you down instead of pushing you up once you're standing at a cliff, the next step you take, right? Beliefs, believe in God, believing higher powers, is something that does not need proof because it exists without proof. Beliefs is something that is in the middle because it's a half fact and it's a half belief. It is a false thought that you have been carrying and repeating over and over and over again that all of a sudden become a fact for you. But they're not. They're just a simple belief that you've reproduced and told yourself long enough for you to believe it. So, this is important when we kind of understand how your identity is being set together, the identity architecture. Because your perception all of a sudden starts forging your identity. Once identity hardens, your perception starts serving it. You do not merely behave in line with identity. You start seeing the world through identity. And this is super important. I know identity is a word that is very vague and that doesn't yet have a lot of substance because we can't describe it. We're still figuring out what identity really means to us. It's easier to say I am depressed, I am happy, to kind of name certain feelings that have been used so much over that we in our brains can conceptualize the definition of that word. But identity is something that is so fluid, ever changing, that we need to start defining it what it means for us, for our life. And I believe identity work in the future will be the most important work everybody is doing. I believe that there's a trend going towards that, people really wanting to work on themselves because I don't know, they've just been poisoned by society. And I strongly believe that identity is something that is super, super important. So again, here, belief change matters so much. You are not just trying to feel better, you are interrupting the perceptual machinery that keeps recreating the same self. Belief becomes the lens through which we see the world. And again, here, a little, um, a little picture of how that self-reinforcing loop actually looks like. So I'm just going to go over it very simply here because in the next slide we're going to explain it. A certain belief creates a prediction that you have about life, right? The belief of I am not good enough creates a certain prediction that no matter what I do in life, I will not deserve success. I will not deserve a happy relationship because I'm not good enough. How can I possibly deserve that? That is your prediction about the future. Your belief already sets the prediction of the future. That prediction, all of a sudden, creates a certain perception. All of a sudden, you only attract people in your life that validate this not feeling good enough about you. You only take in, and somehow it feels like magic that you're getting into a toxic relationship or that you're meeting toxic working colleagues, right? All of a sudden, everything that you do based upon your belief, based upon your prediction, life pulls in what you perceive through the belief system or the belief that you hold. This perception, then, all of a sudden, of pulling in someone, a bad relationship, a bad working colleague, a bad testimonial, a bad week in your business, all of a sudden creates an emotion. That emotion then creates a behavior. That behavior leads to evidence because your behavior now all of a sudden creates that the reality that you're going through that toxic relationship or toxic working pattern or just bad week, and all of a sudden you believe because you have evidence now that you are not good enough. This evidence reinforces your identity and the loop begins all over. So it starts with belief, it ends with belief, but identity is what we make of it. Here again, belief shapes prediction. So what you already expect starts influencing how your brain fills in reality before you consciously evaluate it. Prediction shapes as well perception. You begin noticing what fits the story that you tell yourself. Perception then shapes behavior. So the way something feels to you affects where you move, hesitate, adapt, withdraw, or react. Behavior produces evidence. Your response often helps recreate the same outcome you already believed was likely. And then identity gets reinforced. So the result feels like proof, and the old story strengthens itself again. Why limiting beliefs stay alive? They are often useful, not in the long term, but useful in the short term because they reduce uncertainty, exposure to the world, hope, or responsibility. Let me explain. They protect you against pain. So, hesitating before a project or before a starting your own business or before, saying that I'm not ready actually protects you from public failure. I'm too old to start a business. I'm too old to go on a world journey. Can actually protect you from humiliation of beginnerhood, learning a new language, whatever it is, right? I always choose the wrong partners. Literally can protect you from vulnerability of hope. So they create a certain familiarity. Even unhealthy beliefs can feel emotionally stable because they fit the older internal world your system already knows. And that's why they feel so hard to release because you're not losing just a thought, right? You are losing an old protection strategy, an old version of you. It's like this changes the question a lot because all of a sudden the question is not just is this belief false, but it is also what function has this belief been serving? That is why changing beliefs feels threatening because you, like I said, you're not only removing distortion, you are removing an old psychological protection strategy. Everything that you know, like this is, for example, a great example here again is relationship. And because I've been seeing this a lot with my clients and over the past years, that keep this example in mind. And that's a really, really, really great example. People who are used to toxic relationships, let's say where you have a very ambivalent partner where that kind of like doesn't give you the desires and the needs, it doesn't the it or he or she doesn't fulfill your desires and your needs, right? For some reason, most people that have been through toxic relationships, they say they want different, but the first thing that they do, because their nervous system is so used to this pattern of, okay, so we have been through a toxic relationship, we know the outcome of it, we know that we had already passed negative relationships. So what we do, this is our safe space. This is exactly what we can predict because we know the outcome, we know what's happening in between, we know the pain, and we can foresee the outcome. The outcome is then a breakdown, a breakup, a period of feeling really sad, of kind of isolating ourselves. All of this is information for your brain that tells you, hey, listen, if you pick this, we know that you're not going to die. This sounds so absurd. We know that you're not going to die, so we prefer actually if you pick another relationship like this instead of a healthy one, Because a healthy one we haven't experienced yet, and we don't know what that feels like, and we can't predict the outcome. So here's then where it gets really interesting. If you're used to toxic relationships, that ambivalent kind of vibe dynamic that you have, it feels all of a sudden very, you feel like you're used to it. So now all of a sudden you're kind of like getting out of that period. You say no mas, never like a bad toxic relationship partner ever again. So what you do, you then all of a sudden start working on yourself and you attract all of a sudden a healthy, stable, very secure attachment type individual, man, woman, whatever. And that woman is or man is now giving you everything you need: stability, reassurance, connection, love, everything that you don't know. Here's where it gets crazy. Your nervous system kind of deems this new behavior, which it doesn't know, as threat. The first thing that it does, it's all of a sudden activating your sympathetic nervous system because this means this is too good to be true. This cannot be reality because we are so used to the old thing that we're like, we just know exactly how bad relationships work. If we have now this good relationship, we're going to do everything in its power to validate if this is actually true. So, what you do all of a sudden, and you do this subconsciously based upon your belief system about relationships, you start gaslighting. You start testing your partner at every possible intersection. You start pushing rocks into the road to kind of like test. Sure. Are you sure you're secure and you're safe? Or is this just a layer that, we kind of like wait for that veil and that curtain to drop? And everything that we do as we're now receiving this perfect, this great relationship, this really stable partner, everything we do in our power is to push this person away to get back to what we know and what we feel comfortable with, a toxic relationship. And this is the power of your belief system and your inner patterns. Because even though you have now what you want, your inner system keeps doing everything in its power to push it away, to manipulate it. So later, then, you gaslight it too much, and that partner all of a sudden says, okay, why the F should I stay with you? Because you're giving me literally the hardest time ever. Now, you have seen in that moment of fight the evidence of the behavior. You all of a sudden have evidence for that old identity, that old belief system that says, I don't deserve good relationships anyways. Aha. So I'm single now again. So what's the first thing that I do? I go back to what I feel comfortable with, which is toxic relationship. And that's a human default. Everyone is struggling with this because these beliefs and these patterns, they translate over to every area of your life. So they can start in one area, relationships, but with repetition, they translate because they become part of who you believe you are, how you believe other people perceive you. And it goes over to your self worth, it goes over to your work, it goes over to, I don't know, entrepreneurship, social life, family, whatsoever. So, this is the crazy thing behind it. And here is now the real interesting part about it. Because these three layers of repeating patterns, this, if you understand this, this gives you a lot of information about your patterns and your system. So the first level, the surface pattern, that is everything we see. That is everything people go to a psychologist or a coach with, or they start searching the internet on resolutions and solutions, right? Because what you notice first is the overthinking, the weak boundaries, procrastination, shutdown, people pleasing, repeating the same relational dynamic, right? The same old toxic relationships. That is only the surface pattern. We think this is what we need to work on. But the second layer is actually called the protective logic. What the system is trying to do in that moment of overthinking, it's trying to avoid shame. Weak boundaries, it's trying to reduce uncertainty. Procrastination or shutdown, it's trying to keep you safe. People pleasing, it's trying to preserve connection. Repeating the same old relational dynamics, it's trying to maintain and preserve control and prevent pain. So this is what you really have to understand, that underneath the surface pattern is actually a protective layer, a logic that is trying to protect you from something. Because those parts inside of you that are sabotaging, are actually trying to protect you from something. Something that in your past has been hurting you. And this is now where the third layer kicks in, the identity structure. Because what keeps this repeating is then your old beliefs, your emotional conditioning from your parents, from your friends that you've given yourself, your inner roles, your familiar coping styles of just what you're used to doing in that moment, lashing out, getting aggressive, gaslighting, whatever, and your self concept. And if you only try to fix the visible behavior, so your weak boundaries with people, your procrastination, the deeper layers remain untouched and the loop actually stays intact. And change only becomes possible when the full pattern becomes visible. So the surface pattern, the protective logic underneath, and the identity structure, not just the symptom on top. Reflection exercise number 2. Let's continue on what we've already had in the first one. Now, look underneath the pattern. What pattern shows up over and over and over again in your life? So often that it almost feels like this is just who I am. Name it clearly and simply. Give it a name, give it a stage, give it a spotlight, open up to it, and make it present. What might that pattern be trying to protect you from? Ask yourself, what has it been protecting me from in the past? Rejection from friends and peers, shame of in public, failure, exposure, disappointment, loss of control. What has this pattern quietly been costing you while simultaneously keeping you safe? So what's the cost benefit here? What has it been costing you while simultaneously keeping you safe? And what belief does this pattern rely on, to stay in present? So this you usually catch yourself when you hear patterns such as I'm safer when I'm alone. People always treat me badly, so I prefer, keeping my distance to them. Or I have to protect my own space, so I rather keep people out of it. Or I'm that kind of person who always kind of overreacts if it gets a little bit too stressful. So what belief does this pattern rely on to stay present? What changes the moment, like this is the bigger overarching question, what changes the moment you stop treating that belief as truth and start seeing it as a strategy your system learned? Again, here, same questioning example, just a different layer of it. Why the pattern keeps winning? Okay, so here it's important, familiar feels true. Even when a pattern is painful, something in the system still experiences it as familiar, believable, and emotionally safer than change. Old beliefs shape reality. So you do not only behave from identity, but you begin seeing life through the identity you already expect to be true. That changes what stands out. So setbacks feel like reconfirmation. Opportunities feel less good to be true, and neutral reactions and situations get interpreted as threats. So, a very interesting study that was made by an American university where they were testing a group of women that were given a visible scar on their face, right? And that scar was kind of like made with a lot of pasture and a lot of structure, right? And they were told that they have to hold a conversation with people, man, woman, whatever, different study groups. And what they didn't tell the woman that shortly before they started the interview session, one part of the peer group actually got their face covered up with no, sorry, the entire group of women before getting into the interview rooms with those different individuals, they had makeup being covered over their scars that literally made the scars invisible. The woman still perceived that they have visible scars in their face. So now getting into that interview room, they were kind of like analyzing the behavior of the woman while holding the belief. It's kind of like this placebo effect, where having the belief that they still have a visible scar. So what they've realized is that actually the neutral behavior and neutral behavior, so the people on the opposite side didn't see any scars in their face. But the neutral behavior that the woman perceived from that other person sitting in front of them was actually perceived when they were asked afterwards as a threat. Because their own system, their own filter, believed that their non-respondence to a certain question and their kind of looking at them in a neutral way was perceived through their eyes as a threat, as like, okay, they're judging me now. So reality again is just the idea and basis of that is that reality is just what we perceive. It's the filter that we hold in front of our eyes. So later when it covered up, it's like they kind of like unraveled it, but it's really interesting to see that these neutral reactions that you perceive in other people get interpreted as threats because of the filter that you have inside of you. The protection is faster than conscious choice. So in real moments of stress, old familiar patterns activate faster because your brain needs resolution now. And the patterns get translated into other areas. So, this is what I've explained before. What once was visible in your relationship, now all of a sudden starts becoming visible in your work, self worth, confidence, and you start noting it everywhere. The hidden cost of staying in the pattern. So, we're slowly coming now to the third part, like the second, well, the third of three parts of this workshop, right? And you've kind of learned a lot right now about the underlying core structure, about the different pattern layers of patterns that we have. The system, the underlying system that stays in place if we only work on the surface. The surface is usually what we talk about to our friends, maybe even, therapists, maybe even coaches, right? If we only work on the surface and we don't go underneath it, we don't resolve the inner subconscious pattern. So, the hidden cost of staying in the pattern. Your brain starts expecting it. What once happened occasionally becomes what your system predicts will happen again. You begin noticing proof everywhere. Your attention filters for confirming evidence. Your behavior adapts then to the prediction. You act in subtle ways that align with what you already expect to be true. The pattern reinforces your identity. What was once an experience becomes a belief about who you are. And the loop then becomes self sustaining, right? So you believe triggers a perception, triggers a behavior, evidence, identity, and the system confirms itself over and over and over and over again. So, why forcing change usually doesn't work, right? Because it's a very interesting idea. Like I said, most people try to attack the surface. They push harder and they use things or wordings such as, I want to eliminate this negative behavior. I want to get rid of this part of me that kind of keeps sabotaging myself. The problem here we don't understand, and this is where parts work comes into play, is that the more pressure we apply, the more resistance gets created. Because those parts, like we discovered so far, they don't want to be eliminated. They are here to protect you. So they actually have a positive intention behind their action. We just perceive them as negative because, again, our brain does not differentiate between good or bad. But they want to protect us. The moment you try to get rid of something that wants to stay and that is actually here to stay forever, the more you push it down. Like a lot of times when I ask people, so where do you feel this inner hurt child? They say, I feel it really deep down over here somewhere in my stomach or in my heart. Like this deep down is constantly over the years trying to push it back. No, I don't want you. I don't want to, kind of face my emotions right now. I don't want to feel bad right now. I want solutions, results, feeling good, the best things only, right? But if we only want the best things, we're kind of missing half of the formula because most of the times, through really hard times, we are making the biggest growths, the biggest transformations. At least in my life, it was the case. My biggest downfalls, my biggest rock bottom moments were those moments that shaped me the most. So if we only attack the surface, the deeper logic underneath it stays untouched. If the system still believes the pattern is protecting you, it will recreate it. Pressure increases conflict, right? One part of you, and this is where part work comes in, one part of you tries to push forward, wants solutions, wants to feel good, wants good relationships, wants better business. Another resists even harder. It's a tug of war that is happening where you're standing with one foot in, one foot door, pulling in two directions at the same time. And that is why change actually feels exhausting. You're trying to overpower a system you do not fully yet understand. So if the root stays intact, the loop stays available. Even if the behavior change kind of changes, even if the behavior changes shape for a while, the root still stays intact. So what actually begins to change the pattern? Now we're coming to the practical type of part. I know I've been dragging you for 55 minutes now to kind of get to the point where you were like, okay, finally I'm hearing this now. Freaking finally. Whew. I can hear you're still awake. That's good. I'm happy for that. What actually begins to change the pattern? So you see the pattern for what it is. That's the first step, awareness. What once felt like this is just who I am, all of a sudden becomes recognizable as a repeating system pattern. Transformation is created through awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, and then the right processes and systems to replace an old system with a new one: repetition, behavior, evidence, identity. That is the framework, right? But you got to start somewhere. And the first step is awareness. You uncover the belief driving it. So you see the assumption your mind keeps using to predict, interpret, and confirm reality. You see the assumption and you acknowledge it. You break the loop and create a new behavior. So once the pattern is visible and the belief is no longer absolute, so not longer a law of nature, that's just who I am, but rather this is a part of me that keeps coming up in these situations when I get triggered by X, Y, and Z. You can then interrupt it in real time. And new behavior becomes possible because a different outcome finally feels believable. This isn't inconsistency. It's a war within your system. I've talked about it in one of my last podcast episodes where I talked about your internal conflict. Because again, parts work is my way of working with identity. And it's for me the most beautiful way of working at it because it's not too technical, but rather it combines honesty and openness towards your inner system in a beautiful approach that kind of feels playful and warm and heartfelt. So, parts work is kind of like the idea that your identity is not just one single voice, but it's a multitude of different parts that have been activated or developed throughout your life and that want certain things for you, that expect them. And they kind of had a good intention from the beginning on, but they've somehow been shaped through life, through experiences, through belief systems that we kind of come up. And they started changing, like a person that is being pushed into a new environment shapes and adapts to that environment. So that part, one part of you, for example, here tries to predict growth, right? It moves towards expansion. It goes to therapy, it looks for truth, it changes, and a bigger version. It tries to look for a bigger version of your life. But another part actually predicts risk, right? It moves towards safety, control, certainty, and emotional protection. Both are acting actually on valid logics. So each part is trying to protect or move you forward based on different assumptions. Each part actually carries its own model of reality. What you can call inner conflict is often two parts of you interpreting the same situation through different emotional histories and predictions. And part work begins with self leadership. So the goal here is not to suppress, to eliminate, or fight your parts, but actually to bring them under one hood, to see them as your inner team working towards your greatest potential. Because if those parts that are wanting to move you towards safety, control, certainty, all of a sudden get hurt, get acknowledged, and you actually acknowledge what they really want for you, you can ask them, you can request, and you can make a pact with them to kind of give them more of what they want. Because otherwise, if you don't, they just use old sabotaging patterns. They manipulate, they kind of make you procrastinate, make you do things. If you acknowledge them, you give them enough space to feel heard and seen. At the same time, you take that part that wants expansion, truth, and change, and you look at what it wants. If you now bring those two into harmony and you give one what it wants and you give the other one what it wants, they now can come to a common agreement and they can start working together. So all of a sudden, moving forward doesn't feel so scary anymore. It doesn't feel like you're being pushed back because if you respect one part's boundary and the other part's boundary, you can, as the team captain, as the leader of your inner team, all of a sudden you can control and you can see what is happening in your life. And you can translate that to relationships, to business, to entrepreneurship. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful process. But again, it all starts with self leadership, right? Third part, I mean, as you're lying in bed, here it gets a little bit tricky, but I guess state shifting is really important because your state is shaping your reality. The thoughts you access, the options you see, and the decisions you make are all filtered through the state your body is in. Emotions is nothing else but energy in motion, and stuck emotions are nothing more than energies that didn't learn how to express themselves and move through our energetical body to kind of get released. Thoughts and emotions want to be passed through and not kept. And this is where shapes, the states, actually become really important. Because when you're having a stressful moment, pay attention to how your body and physiology changes. If you're having a stressful situation and you need to act, the biggest problem people do is act out of stress because your perception shrinks, your worldview gets smaller, your decision making gets weaker, and your old patterns are more easily taking over because that creative room for something new is not really there. So what I always recommend, break the state before it decides for you. So here it's important. I teach a lot of state shifting in my sessions, but as well I give them to people. On one hand side, you can do that through breath work. On the other hand side is you can do that through active state changes. So if you check yourself right now lying in bed, right, and you start having negative thoughts, change your posture. Roll your shoulders back, lift your head up a little bit more, kind of like tap yourself on the chest a little bit, and start perceiving your thoughts differently. Like you will notice that all of a sudden, the more we work with gravity, the more positive thoughts we have. It's kind of like funny. If we visualize positive and negative, we always think positive is up, negative is down, right? So if you take gravity and anti-gravity as like the direct correlation between good and bad, heaven and hell for yourself, you will notice that the more anti-gravitational movements you do, the more you lift yourself up, the more you breathe in, you lift and you take yourself away from the negative. There's a really funny exercise that you can try at home and that you can try whenever you're having a little moment for yourself. It's called the Bobby Brown technique. It's an NLP technique that kind of promises instant state change. So the claim is it is impossible, literally impossible, to have negative feelings and thoughts while lifting your hands above your head really, really high. Try to do that. I mean, if you're lying in bed right now, no need to try it, but try it when you're
I
doing it.
am doing it, huh?
Ah, you're doing it
I
right
mean,
now. Okay,
I'm
try to
sitting like on a chair, so I can do that. Yeah.
try to put your hands above your head, really, really high, and now say out to yourself, and this is going to be the funny part. Now say out to yourself, "Man, am I feeling so bad? Man, am I feeling so bad?" Repeat it and see after how many times of saying it you will actually start laughing. Man, am I feeling so bad? Man, am I feeling so bad?
Man,
Man, am I feeling so
man, am I feeling so bad?
really
Yeah.
put your hands up because this is where an instant state shift happens. The more anti-gravitational movements you do, so lifting upwards, the less negative thoughts you will produce. Don't ask me how energetically speaking that is happening. I have no idea. But if we now compare a happy person with a depressed person, you see a correlation in physiology. Depression comes from the similar word compression. So, what do depressed people with a depression have a lot of times? A lot of thoughts. Now, give those thoughts a nanogram, each thought they have. So take now repeating a negative thoughts that are supposed to pull you down. A lot of times, people with depression they have their shoulders shrugged down. They have their head, their back arched. Usually, they're looking down. Usually, they have a very gravitational physiology, a physiological state. I'm not saying that depression in and of itself can just be cured through state shift. That is not the case, right? But if you take that as an example, if you now want to shift your state, you can actually break patterns and regain control by doing things, exercises that will help you to calm your nervous system, to push or pull your physiology upwards, to give you a different access to a different way of thinking, a more positive one. So breath helps, box breathing helps, Bobby Brown technique helps if you're having a bad day or if you need to make a decision, put your hands up and just say, man, am I feeling so bad? Or man, is this work so difficult? See how your thoughts start shifting, right? Shift your state, shift your perspective. That's the important thing. Feel into your body. You do not see life as it is, but you see it through the state you are in. So, here's just a quick little great example, and we're coming slowly to the end as well of the workshop. Here, if you're interested, feel free to take a screenshot and copy that screenshot because I've been working last year with Jean Nicolas. He was one of my long-term clients, and we started off. We had a really, really, really great coaching connection, coaching relationship with each other, because he kind of came to me beginning of the year with a lot of self doubts. He was supposed to be the man of the family, but he kept falling into negative patterns and old cycles where he was self sabotaging himself, then leading into aggressive and aggressive behavior that kind of led to wanting to zone out and just gaming and playing computer all night long, that kind of led into a downward spiral of pornography and a porn addiction that kind of developed through it. And his idea was he was falling out of structure, right? He was repeating the same patterns despite knowing what to do, and it kind of created frustration because there was this obvious trigger system that brought him down the spiral and he didn't know how to get out of it. So, underneath it, we established his inner team. So, we identified 5 different parts that are important to him and that were working in opposite directions, communicating in different languages, not literally, but imaginatively. They were speaking different languages and they were not hearing each other because they were talking on different levels. And his team was just not in harmony at all. So, we kind of resolved that by bringing back or uncovering, creating awareness towards the internal system, bringing balance and harmony back into his team. And we kind of installed processes and direct actions, methods of operating that were helping him to kind of relieve the inner conflict and bring back, cohesion into his team. And what changed? He stopped fighting himself blindly and began understanding each part, what he needed, what he feared, and how it could actually support him, how those parts could support him. And once the system made sense, he could step into leadership, and from there build structure and consistency instead of forcing them. So, lastly, beliefs or facts stay true. I've mentioned this in the beginning. Like, facts are just what we deem as natural truths. Faith does not require evidence, right? It can exist without proof, and beliefs actually sit in between. They are not facts, yet they quietly shape what feels real, possible, and true to you. And repetition actually makes them feel certain. So a belief can feel like a law of nature simply because it has been reinforced over time. So the better question becomes, is this belief expanding how I live and act, or is it quietly keeping me inside the same pattern? What I really, really hope that you took from tonight is that your pattern is not just random. There's logic underneath what keeps repeating. Your struggle is not proof of weakness, it often points to an internal system that still needs deeper understanding. Your brain is already filtering reality through prior beliefs, expectations, and identity based assumptions. So that means change is deeper than habits. It is not like some kind of cosmetic, woo woo, motivational, inspirational work, right? It is actually deeper restructuring of yourself. And a different relationship with yourself is possible. And it is usually begins with seeing yourself more truthfully, not more harshly. Okay, so this is the main and core part. Now I just quickly want to go over the next steps, for everyone that is kind of watching the replay of this workshop. If whatever I said is interesting to you and you feel you want to kind of dive deeper, like here are the next steps for you, right? There's two paths. If this resonated, you do not leave tonight with pressure. You only need to leave with honesty about what kind of support would help you most right now. Two ways to continue this work. On one hand side, I offer one-on-one discovery calls. So in this 30-minute discovery call, we kind of go deeper into your identity pattern and see if, how working together would look like and if it would be the right fit to actually work together, right? More direct support because the real transformation is in that one-on-one work and that real guidance. And here's the news that I kind of had already teased a little bit in the beginning. I'm currently starting a online community for self-aware, conscious individuals who want to dive deeper on a more community-based level with like digital workshops, more deeper courses that go in depth, weekly calls, and much, much more. So I have a early bird community list that people can register to. So for the first path, if you feel called towards it, right? If you want to look deeper on what's repeating, what part and patterns may be driving it underneath the surface, and whether deeper coaching support is the right fit for you, because this is where the real magic actually happens, feel free to scan the QR code and you can just book your free 30-minute discovery call slot. And for the second path, here you can join the early bird list. So if this work resonates, but you're not ready for one-on-one coaching yet, I get it. It's okay. Some do. Some kind of like went a long way and they kind of want that direct support. Others kind of say, I actually want to, start somewhere softer. You can actually register for yourself through the link as well for that online community. It's a community based on identity work, self-worth, inner parts, relationship and transformations, success, mind hacks, just basically everything that I've learned through my journey over the past 10, 12 years right now, all packed into different courses and live sessions. So there's the community aspect behind it. So as well here, feel free to scan the list, to register yourself for the early bird community. So everyone that is part of it is actually being considered as a founding member. You have, when the community launches, an initial price that will stay like this forever as long as you stay active, right? So a reduced advantage in comparison to the people that are joining later. And you're basically being considered as like the founding members of it, right? So there's a lot of benefits that come with that too. So feel free to scan that code and just, join the early bird list to be the first one to hear about it when it opens. What I want you to remember, you are not stuck because you lack awareness. You are stuck because an old pattern is still running the system. And once that system becomes visible, the path forward becomes much clearer. Thank you for being here. And now, questions, reflections, and the end of the presentation. Joanna, hi.
Yes.
You're still there.
Hi.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Suffocating.
Yeah,
Kind of like,
yeah.
my brain is like mashed potatoes right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of information, I have to say, and very interesting dance information. So I try to understand everything.
Hmm.
Uh, yes. Well, what can I say? I think the most important